Like and subscribe right now, or this spider is gonna crawl on your face while you're sleeping.
People who are raised by animals in the wild. Feral children are human children who have lived away from human contact from a very young age and have little to no experience of human care, loving or social behavior, and crucially, of human language. Feral children are confined by humans, often parents, brought up by animals, or live in the wild in isolation. While growing up, you may have seen or read about Tarzan or Mowgli and been fascinated about how they grew up in the jungle among the huge beasts such as tigers, jaguars, and wolves, among the rest. However, when you come to think of it, it really is hard for a feral child to become a part of the human society after having spent decades amongst the wild beasts. There have been hundreds of recorded cases throughout the history of feral children, and here we present you people who got raised by animals in the wild. Number 12. Raised by goats. In June 2012, social workers in Russia discovered a toddler who had been locked in a room with goats by his mother. The boy reportedly played and slept with the goats, but nourishment was apparently hard to come by as he weighed a third less than the typical child of his age. When the child was rescued, his mother had disappeared. Doctors have since tried to acclimate the toddler to human life with some difficulty. Quote, "He refused to sleep in the cot. He tried to get underneath and sleep there. He was very scared of adults." Number 11. Medina. Medina lived with dogs from birth until she was 3 years old, sharing their food, playing with them, and sleeping with them when it was cold in winter. When social workers found her in 2013, she was naked, walking on all fours and growling like a dog. Medina's father had left soon after her birth. Her mother, 23 years old, took to alcohol. She was frequently too drunk to look after for her child and often disappeared. She would frequently invite local alcoholics to visit the house. Her alcoholic mother would sit at the table to eat while her daughter gnawed on bones on the floor with the dogs. Medina would run away to a local playground when her mother got angry, but the other children wouldn't play with her as she could hardly speak and would fight with everyone. So dogs became her best and only friends. Number 10. Shamdio. In May 1972, a boy about the age of 4 was discovered in the forest of Muzaffarkhana, about 20 miles from Sultanpur, India. The boy was playing with wolf cubs. He had very dark skin, long hooked fingernails, matted hair, and calluses on his palms, elbows, and knees. He shared several characteristics with Kamala and Amala: sharpened teeth, craving for blood, earth-eating, chicken hunting, love of darkness, and friendship with dogs and jackals. He was named Shamdio and taken to the village of Narayanpur. Although weaned off raw meat, he never talked, but learned some sign language. In 1978, he was admitted to Mother Teresa's home for the destitute and dying in Lucknow, where he was renamed Pascal and was visited by Bruce Chatwin in 1978. He died in February 1985. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that will take just 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell and you get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it. It really works. Number 9. The Wild Girl of Champagne. The Wild Girl of Champagne had probably learned to speak before her abandonment, for she is a rare example of a wild child learning to talk coherently. Her diet consisted of birds, frogs, fish, leaves, branches, and roots. Given a rabbit, she immediately skinned and devoured it. According to a contemporary witness, the famous scientist Charles-Marie de la Condamine, quote, "Her fingers, and in particular her thumbs, were extraordinarily large," end quote. She is said to have used her thumbs to dig out roots and swing from tree to tree like a monkey. She was a very fast runner and had phenomenal sharp eyesight. When the Queen of Poland, the mother of the French Queen, passed through Champagne in 1737 to take possession of the Duchy of Lorraine, she heard about the girl and took her hunting, where she outran and killed rabbits. Number 8. John Sibunya. One day in 1999, a Ugandan villager named Millie Seba went further than usual in search for firewood and came upon a little boy with a pack of monkeys. She summoned help and the boy was cornered up a tree. He was brought back to Millie's village. His knees were almost white from walking on them. His nails were very long and curled, and he wasn't house-trained. A villager identified the boy as John Sibunya, last seen in 1988 the age of 2 or 3 when his father murdered his mother and disappeared. For the next 3 years or so, he lived wild. He vaguely remembers monkeys coming up to him after a few days and offering him roots and nuts, sweet potatoes, and cassava. The 5 monkeys, 2 of them young, were weary at first, but befriended him within about 2 weeks and taught him, he says, to travel with them, to search for food, and to climb trees. In October 1999, he went to Britain as part of the 20-strong Pearl of Africa Children's Choir. Number 7. The Syrian Gazelle Boy. Jean-Claude Auger, an anthropologist from the Basque Country, was traveling alone across the Spanish Sahara, or Rio de Oro, in 1960 when he met some Nemadi nomads, who told him about a wild child a day's journey away. The next day he followed the nomads' directions. On the horizon he saw a naked child, quote, galloping in gigantic bounds among a large cavalcade of white gazelles. The boy walked on all fours, but occasionally assumed an upright gait, suggested to Auger that he was abandoned or lost at about 7 or 8 months, after having already learned to stand. He habitually twitched his muscles, scalp, nose, and ears, much like the rest of the herd in response to the slightest noise. He would eat desert roots with his teeth, pucking his nostrils like the gazelles. He appeared to be herbivorous apart from the occasional agama lizard or worm when plant life was lacking. His teeth edges were level like those of a herbivorous animal. In 1966, an unsuccessful attempt was made to catch the boy in a net suspended from a helicopter. Unlike most of the feral children of whom we have records, the gazelle boy was never removed from his wild companions. Number 6. Oksana Malaya. Oksana Malaya, born in November 1983, was found as an 8-year-old child in Ukraine in 1991, having lived most of her life in the company of dogs. She picked up a number of dog-like habits and found it difficult to master language. Oksana's alcoholic parents were unable to care for her. They lived in an impoverished area where there were wild dogs roaming the streets. She lived in a dog kennel behind her house where she was cared for by dogs and learned their behaviors and mannerisms. She growled, barked, and crouched like a dog, sniffed at her food before she ate it, and was found to have acquired extremely acute senses of hearing, smell, and sight. Malaya was eventually transferred to the foster home for mentally disabled children in Barabul. She underwent years of specialized therapy and education to address her behavioral, social, and educational issues. Upon adulthood, Malaya was taught to subdue her dog-like behavior. She learned to speak fluently and intelligently and works on a farm milking cows but remains somewhat intellectually impaired. In 2013, Malaya gave an interview on national Ukrainian TV where she talked about herself and answered questions. During the interview, Malaya said that she wants to be treated like a normal human being and is offended when others call her a dog girl. She said that she wants her brothers to visit her more often and that her main dream in life is to find her biological mother. Number 5. Parava the Bird Boy. The most recent case of Mowgli syndrome was that of a 7-year-old boy who was rescued by Russian healthcare workers after being discovered living in a 2-bedroom apartment with his mother and abundance of feathered friends. It would appear the small apartment doubled as an aviary with cages filled with dozens of birds. In an interview, one of the rescuers, social worker Galina Volskaya, said that his mother treated him like another pet. While he was never physically harmed by his mother, she simply never spoke to him. It was the birds who communicated with the boy. Volskaya said, quote, he just chirps, and when realizing that he's not understood, starts to wave his hands in the way birds winnow wings. The boy was shifted to an asylum, but was soon transferred to a center of psychological care. Number 4. The Leopard Boy. A leopard child was reported by E.C. Stuart Baker in the Journal of the Bombay National History Society dated July 1920. The boy was stolen from his parents by a leopardess in North Kachar Hills near Assam in about 1912, and 3 years later recovered and identified. At the time, the child ran on all fours almost as fast as a man could run, whilst dodging in and out of bushes, and with other obstacles, he was much cleverer and quicker. His knees had hard colostocies on them, and his toes were retained upright, almost at right angles to his instep. The palms on his hands and the pads on his toes and thumbs were also covered with very tough skin. When first caught, he bit and fought with everyone, and if any village fowl came within his reach, they were seized, torn to pieces, and eaten with extraordinary rapidity. Number 3. Kamala and Amala. The most famous wolf children are the 2 girls captured in October 1920 from a huge abandoned anthill squatted by wolves near Gandamuri in the vicinity of Mindapur, west of Calcutta, by villagers under the direction of Reverend Jal Singh, an Anglican missionary. The mother wolf was shot. The girls were named Kamala and Amala and were thought to be aged about 8 and 2. According to Singh, the girls had misshapen jaws, elongated canines, and the eyes that shone in the dark with the peculiar blue glare of cats and dogs. Amala died the following year, but Kamala survived until 1929, by which time she had given up eating carrion, had learned to walk upright, and spoke about 50 words. Number 2. The Bear Girl. In 1937, George Morans described a visit to a Turkish lunatic asylum in Bursa, Turkey, where he met a girl who had allegedly lived with bears for many years. Hunters in a mountainous forest near Adana had shot a she-bear and then been attacked by a powerful little wood spirit. Finally overcome, this turned out to be a human child, though utterly bear-like in her voice, habits, and physique. She refused all cooked food and slept in a mattress in a dark corner of her room. Investigations showed that a 2-year-old child had disappeared from a nearby village 14 years earlier, and it was presumed that a bear had adopted her. Number 1. Wild Peter. The first really famous feral child was Wild Peter, quote, a naked, brownish, black-haired creature, end quote. Captured near Helpenson in Hanover in 1724 when he was about 12. He climbed trees with ease, lived off plants, and seemed incapable of speech. He refused bread, preferring to strip the bark from green twigs and suck on the sap. But he eventually learned to eat fruit and vegetables. He was presented at court in Hanover to George I and taken to England, where he was studied by leading men of letters. He spent 68 years in society, but never learned to say anything except Peter and King George, although his hearing and sense of smell were said to be, quote, particularly acute.